Hello and welcome to the No One Asked You podcast. I'm reading The Wheel of Time for the first time and sharing the experience with you. This is One Good Turn, The Eye of the World, and today I am covering Chapter 49. We get another chase scene. I'm low-key hoping it's the final chase scene of the book. It didn't actually bother me at all, but I was reflecting as I went to bed last night how much of this book is chase scene. And it had me excited for future books in a way. It would be, I'm hoping whatever it is that they do here at the Eye of the World, and in many ways I expect it to, reset the terms of engagement. Is that the idea? I'm ready to see some more politicking. I'm ready to see some more war story, which I think we're only just starting to get into with Lan and his stuff. Back to the politicking for a second. I think that'll come with Moraine. And I'm looking forward to seeing the Emmonsfielders. I don't know. I don't know if I expect them to gain any sort of power out of this by any means, but, well, I guess particularly from the last chapter, this idea of, well, they're still bound for Tar Valon at some point. So, I don't know, maybe a schooling storyline. They're all studying and so on, learning skills. I am aware the next book, I guess, is about the Horn of Valir. So, insofar as that plays a part in the book, I imagine them all going on a hunt, whatever that means, which doesn't sound like it'll be in Tar Valon. You can definitely tell we're nearing the end of the book when I start theorizing about what's going to happen in the next one. No, I stand by what I said, though, to a degree in the last episode or so, which is to say I'm kind of thinking the eye might be some sort of wish-granting device. In a way, I almost see a similarity to Ruin in the Well of Ascension. And then I'm kind of filled with this ominous feeling of the taint will corrupt whatever it is that they wish for. So these are all things that are going on in my mind. And then I'll have something to say about the taint when we meet the Jolly Green Giant. So, yes, I guess I'll drop that title now. I was considering saving it for when we actually meet him, but there it is. Oh, yes, and it's the Dune chapter as well. I kid. The parallels to Lord of the Rings are much more stark than Dune. Let's get into it, shall we? The group wakes up. Heat covers the spoiled lands in a heavy blanket. Rand reflects that even here the sky is still blue. That seems nice. I like that. Amazingly, Rand slept. He's surprised by it. Nynaeve has been crying. Her eyes are red-rimmed, which is very sad, and Lan's doing his stoic Lan thing, and seemingly to Rand, avoiding her gaze. Egwene goes over to ask what's wrong. We don't get the conversation itself. Rand is kind of observing it from a distance, and it's one of those they're huddled together, whispering with each other type things, and you get the sense that Nynaeve at first doesn't want to say anything, but Egwene gets closer, and so she tells Egwene, and it ends in a laugh and a hug, and Egwene glaring at Lan. So you can kind of glean what the conversation there was. Rand does a quick clean. Apparently Lan portions out a small bit of water for brushing teeth, etc. And pretty much from that point on, I imagine, what if none of them were cleaning themselves? They would be very dirty folks who save the world. Rand wonders if women can read men's minds. I don't think that's the case. I'll have to ask Kitty if she can, but I don't think so. But then we get the line, Rand thinks to himself, all women are Aes Sedai. And then he tells himself that's just the blight getting to him. But I found this to be a very interesting line. All women are Aes Sedai. I feel as if Jordan put this line in here, particularly close to the end of the book, more for a meta purpose than anything else. We are all the dragon and we are all the Aes Sedai, and I don't know, I feel like there's a mythological, psychological, archetypal, putting out all the buzzwords today, aren't we? Concept here that I feel like Jordan wants to impart on readers through this story here. At least that is my interpretation of the line. The campsite disappears and we get a look at the 7 towers. They stood plain in the morning light, distant broken stumps like huge rough hills that merely hinted at grandeur gone. The 100 lakes were a smooth, unruffled blue. Nothing broke the surface this morning. When he looked at the lakes and the ruined towers, he could almost ignore the sickly things growing around the hill. Lan did not seem to be avoiding looking at the towers any more than he seemed to be avoiding Nynaeve, but somehow he never did, as he concentrated on getting them ready to go. Yeah, I've put in an Editor Dorcas note in the last episode that caught Rand's quick glimpse of the 7 towers. Perhaps I could have expanded upon Nynaeve's choice to approach Lan at such a time as they are close to his home, and what kind of emotional toll it must be on Lan to have been confronted with her confession while he's also dealing with whatever emotional turmoil comes from seeing his broken home here in the Blight. Poor Lan. Poor stoic Lan. Something happens with the women. Nothing happened that Rand could see except that Nynaeve and Egwene shivered despite the heat and rubbed their arms briskly. Egwene's hands suddenly froze on her arms and she opened her mouth staring at the wisdom. Before she could speak, Nynaeve also ceased her rubbing and gave her a sharp look. The 2 women looked at one another, then Egwene nodded and grinned, and after a moment Nynaeve did too, though her smile was only half-hearted. Something went over my head here. I'm not sure what this was about, and I feel almost embarrassed that I don't seem to have it. I was expecting, since I didn't get it, for something to happen then to Rand, and then that would be the explanation of whatever it was that they were experiencing. But I don't recall that happening. Anyway, Matt demands to know, what are we waiting for? Apparently, Moraine is taking extra care, extra caution, extra effort, and extra time to make sure that they have left absolutely no track, which is probably for the best. I approve. Egwene asks if they'll reach the Eye that day, and Moraine says, I hope that we will. When I found it before, it was just the other side of the mountains at the foot of the high passes. He says it moves, Matt said, nodding at Loyal. What if it isn't where you expect? Then we will continue to hunt until we find it. The Green Man senses need, and there can be no greater than ours. Our need is the hope of the world. I think as I'm going through this, I was not expecting them to find it. They do by the end of the chapter, and I don't think I expected them to. I think there was going to be either some unexpected difficulty right at the barrier, so to speak, not of the passes, but at the barrier to the Eye, or they might end up having to deal with some new faction altogether. But that's not the case. Expectation subverted. They continue on, and we get the prose. As the mountains grew closer, so did the true blight. Where a leaf had been spotted black and mottled yellow before, now foliage fell wetly while he watched, breaking apart from the weight of its own corruption. The trees themselves were tortured, crippled things, twisted branches clawing at the sky as if begging for mercy from some power that refused to hear. Ooze slid like pus from bark, cracked and split, as if nothing truly solid was left to them. The trees seemed to tremble from the passage of the horses over the ground. We've had this rotting imagery before, and this swampy imagery, it does make one think that that kind of terrain is a part of the ecosystem. It's a very different biome than Mount Doom in Lord of the Rings. And I appreciate that. This is no less intimidating. This is no less oppressive, but it's certainly different. I like the flavor of it. Matt thinks the trees look like they want to grab them. Nynaeve gives him an exasperated look, and Matt becomes defensive. Fairly. Look, Matt complains more than I think the others do, but people also kind of treat him a bit more mean than any of the others. But Moraine affirms, and some of them do want to, which is a scary, scary thought. In a small way, I think of The Wizard of Oz, when Dorothy and the group are walking through that forest at the end, and I think there's like the Jitterbug song that got cut, although I imagine this world here to be a bit more colorful than the forest in The Wizard of Oz. Rand wonders why a tree would grab a man even if it could. He thinks they're just imagining things. Sir, all the things you've seen, you think it's impossible for a tree to grab a person? Come on. And then he thinks that a nearby tree trembles. The tree suddenly whipped back and forth, then bent down, flailing at the ground. Something screamed, shrill and piercing. The tree sprang back straight, its limbs entwined around a dark mass that writhed and spat and screamed. So first off, what did the tree grab? It's at this point I'm also wondering if the Green Man might be an Ent. We'll get to that later. The horses are kind of freaking out. Lan commands them to keep moving, and so does Moraine, and everyone's trying to stay close together. Lan runs off to do Lan things, and of course Nynaeve calls out for him, but Moraine says, Lan can look after himself, ride wisdom! And this is when the chase scene begins, more or less. Lan reappears quick enough with black blood on his blade, and the existence of black blood confused me just a little bit. I wondered if he was fighting the trees, which I have a hard time imagining as moving. I don't mean whipping around and branches grabbing stuff. I mean more like pulling their roots from the ground and walking from one location to another. So I wondered if Lan was fighting whatever it was that the tree had attacked. Because I also couldn't quite imagine trees bleeding, although I guess corrupted sap might count or something. Anyway, doesn't matter. Lan wipes it off with a cloth, and then the cloth itself dissolves. So there I'm thinking, man, that's a good sword that doesn't dissolve from the black blood. Silently, a massive body leaped out of the trees at them, and I read out of the trees, and again, I found myself just a bit confused. Are they fighting the trees, or are they fighting something else that is also fighting trees, or is utilizing the trees? But then it becomes horrifyingly clear that these are demonic, scary creatures. I played the D&D adventure module, Descent to Avernus, ages and ages ago, and the module makes the distinction, and I guess D&D writ large, the difference between devils and demons, with devils being more lawful, evil, and like agreeing to contracts, and then you've got the demons, which are these horrific chaos creatures with strange appendages and oversized things. It's horrors. And that is very much what is described in these creatures that they're fighting. Amazingly, good old Matt actually gets a good shot in. Matt's arrow flashed, piercing the one eye in a head that seemed almost mouth and teeth. Kicking and screaming, the thing fell one bound short of them. Rand stared as they hurried past. Stiff hair like long bristles covered it, and it had too many legs joining a body as big as a bear at odd angles. Some of them, at least, those coming out of its back, had to be useless for walking, but the finger-long claws at their ends tore the earth in its death agony. So yeah, these are chaos creatures, I think. Moraine says, It should not have been willing to come so close to one who touches the true source. And Lan responds, Agelmar said the blight stirs. Perhaps the blight also knows a web is forming in the pattern. And again, they must hurry. The chase scene continues on. Rand has his sword out, Matt has his bow out, Perrin has his axe out, and Rand shouts out, Manatherin! He screamed back at the trees till his throat ached. The heron-marked steel fleshed in the strengthless sunlight. Manatherin! Manatherin! And Matt is shouting Karai on Kaldazar, Karai on Elisanda, and so on. And Perrin is in his stirrups, silent and grim, not unlike Lan, I think. I am, of course, called back to that first fight scene that they had closer to the start of the book when they started shouting these things out. And I think this is kind of a nice parallel. They are so much more competent and prepared this time around. I mean, it's still just as dire and scary and deadly and that much worse. The stakes have risen, but there's also this proud feeling that I feel for them more than I did then, because I think of everything that they've been through. Moraine is sending out fireballs. Lan is running in and out of the trees. Each time he returns with wounds and blood, but Moraine heals him and he runs out again. And Moraine is annoyed that she has to be using the one power because it's basically lighting their location up like a beacon. Then we get the prose, a fluting cry arose behind them. Distant and thin, it cut through the snarling from the denizens of the blight around them. And everything freezes, even the chaos creatures. And it's like, what can scare a chaos creature? Lan says, worms. And yeah, it is, I think, a bit much to consider these worms Dune worms. Nevertheless, I hear worms and now my mind goes to Dune. But even if they aren't as big as the Dune worms, they are still clearly very intimidating. Least of all because they can send away chaos creatures. In fact, Matt finds the idea of chaos creatures being scared of worms to be strange. The prose is, they were scared off by worms? Matt said incredulously. And then we get them talked up by Lan. A worm can kill a Fade if the Fade hasn't the Dark One's own luck with it. We have an entire pack on our trail. Ride, ride! So it's not just one. And then it's just compounding scariness, worse upon worse upon worse. Egwene says, won't the worms follow us into the mountains? Lan laughs and Loyal moans, they won't. Worms are afraid of what lives in the high passes. So Jordan's putting in a hell of a lot of effort into making us feel scared and really trying to communicate just how dangerous everything is here in Caelid. And considering where this chapter ends, I can kind of see an element of, in horror movies, you never want to actually show the monster because nothing you show can be scarier than what's imagined. At play here with these scary things are scared of this idea. It's effective. And so they're running as fast as they can. We get that oh so devastating line from Lan. We are not going to make it, Lan announced. He did not slow Mandarb's gallop, but his sword was suddenly in his hand again. Watch yourself in the high passes, Moraine, and you'll get through. And at this point, there was genuine concern that Lan would not make it here. Like, I didn't think necessarily that he'd be dead and we'd never see him again, but I genuinely thought he would split off from the group. I remember when they were making their way through the ways, and I kept saying, they're not going to be separated. They're going to make it through. And that's that. Whatever sense of that I had then, I did not have in this chapter. Like, I feel as if enough time had passed since the separation, and we're close enough now to the end of the book that if one or two folks either got picked off or separated, it wouldn't be so strange. So I was genuinely concerned, especially with how much time has been devoted to Lan's backstory here. It's such a storytelling thing. You can tell when a character's going to die when suddenly there's a big focus on them. Nynaeve doesn't want him to do what he indicates. Moraine doesn't want him to do what he indicates. Matt talks about shooting them with arrows, but that wouldn't do enough by any stretch of the imagination. And in hindsight, knowing what is about to happen, you can pretty much say Jordan has to set up a sense of hopelessness in order to build the greatest sense of need for the eye to appear, or for them to arrive. However you want to phrase it. Rand thinks, Light, what's up ahead that can scare what's behind? Light, help me. I've never been so afraid. I don't want to go any further. No further. Seeking the flame in the void, he railed at himself. Fool, you frightened fool, cowardly fool. You can't stay here and you can't go back. Are you going to leave Egwene to face it alone? And this far into his thought, I'm thinking he's going to use the one power again. And Moraine will see it. And then that will set up a whole avalanche of revelations and concerns and so on. So that was what I was expecting to have happen. The prose continues. The void eluded him, forming, then shivering into 1,000 points of light, reforming and shattering again, each point burning into his bones until he quivered with the pain and thought he must burst open. I felt reassured of my one power prediction at that description, because that seems kind of one powery. Light, help me, I can't go on, light, help me! He was gathering the bay's reins to turn back, to face the worms or anything rather than what lay ahead. So he had it. He had his moment of giving up. Sort of. He was prepared to run, poor guy. What does that say about him? Is this a spiritual failure? Is this meant to be some sort of big moment? Between one slope of a hill and the next, between crest and peak, the blight was gone. Green leaves covered peacefully spreading branches, wildflowers made a carpet of bright patches and grasses stirred by a sweet spring breeze. Butterflies fluttered from blossom to blossom with buzzing bees, and birds trilled their songs. I'm thinking, did he teleport them? And then I'm like, oh, nope, they probably found it. They're there. Interesting. Give me a moment to catch my feet, so to speak. Moraine says, we have reached safety. This is the Green Man's place, and the eye of the world is here. Nothing of the blight can enter here. Not for lack of trying, though, as we're about to learn. There's comments about expectations that it would be beyond the mountains, and then we get the deep voice from the trees.
This place is always where it is. All that changes is where those who need it are.
Suitably cryptic. To be expected. A figure stepped out of the foliage, a man's shape as much bigger than Loyal as the Ogier was bigger than Rand. A man's shape of woven vines and leaves, green and growing. His hair was grass flowing to his shoulders, his eyes huge hazelnuts, his fingernails acorns. Green leaves made his tunic and trousers, seamless bark his boots. Butterflies swirled around him, lighting on his fingers, his shoulders, his face. Only one thing spoiled the verdant perfection. A deep fissure ran up his cheeks and temples across the top of his head, and in that the vines were brown and withered. I admit, I was expecting more of a jolly green giant kind of thing rather than an Ent, but I wasn't against the idea of an Ent either. It was definitely something I considered. I think the description of the hazelnut eyes and acorn fingernails kind of gives him an almost cartoonish vibe. That was a thought. Egwin whispers, the Green Man. And he smiles and birds sing louder, so he's an avatar of nature.
Of course I am. Who else would be here?
He looks at Loyal.
It is good to see you, little brother. In the past, many of you came to visit me, but few of recent days.
And Loyal says, you honor me, Tree Brother.
Singu macho shi tingshen.
The Green Man puts his arm on Loyal's shoulder. Loyal looks like a child by comparison.
There is no honoring, little brother. We will sing tree songs together, and remember the great trees, and the steading, and hold the longing at bay.
And you are, I think, taken aback by this deity's lack of concern, his calmness, particularly in the face of what we just escaped, and I had assumed that he's keeping the dark at bay, so I would have imagined a slightly more, I don't want to say serious personality, but a bearing of someone who, say, is constantly pushing against something. He looks over at Perrin and says,
"O wolf brother, do the old times truly walk again then?"
He says that as if it's a good thing, and I'm so used to talk of very, very old things being paired with the old barriers are dying, and therefore it's possibly a bad thing. The fact that the Green Man seems elated kind of recontextualizes the concept of old times walking again. Perrin doesn't really answer. He turns his horse and checks the saddle girth, and then the Green Man speaks to Rand. "Ha ha!
Strange clothes you wear, child of the dragon. Has the wheel turned so far? Do the people of the dragon return to the first covenant? But you wear a sword. That is neither now nor then.
Couple of things there. Child of the dragon. So it's not been a particular secret that I think Rand is the dragon reborn. It seems all but confirmed in the book, and I'm pretty sure it's been confirmed elsewhere for me at least as well. So I saw Child of the Dragon and I thought, he didn't say Dragon Reborn? Interesting. But then you get to do the people of the dragon return to the First Covenant, and you wonder, is he referring to the Aiel? And you wonder if all of the Dragon Reborns of the past are Aielmen? And then you wonder what it would mean to return to the First Covenant, and the implication that whatever it is, they left it. And then you get to, is it so strange that he has a sword? I kind of had the impression that the Aiel are very fearsome people. I guess there must have been a time long, long, long ago where they were not willing to have swords. And then you have to wonder the implications of the Dragon Reborn this time around being willing to use a sword. What does that mean? And Rand has kind of a dumb moment. One would think he'd be able to infer something about the Aiel, but he says, I don't know what you're talking about. What do you mean? The green man touched the brown scar across his head. For a moment, he seemed confused.
I cannot say. My memories are torn and often fleeting, and much of what remains is like leaves visited by caterpillars. Yet, I am sure. No, it is gone. But you are welcome here. You, Moraine Sedai, are more than a surprise. When this place was made, it was made so that none could find it twice. How have you come here?
So it's interesting to note that the Green Man then doesn't seem to have a say in who comes and who doesn't. It seems to be the Eye itself that has the say. And this man may end up just being a guardian of it. Moraine explains that their need is the world's need, and the Green Man sighs.
Then it has come again. That memory remains whole. The Dark One stirs. I have feared it. Every turning of years, the Blight strives harder to come inside. And this turn, the struggle to keep it out has been greater than ever since the beginning. Come, I will take you.
And yeah, from the fact that he seems to have a head wound and it's eating away at his memories is very concerning. That is the Dark One getting closer to the Eye. Excellent chapter. I hope they make it to the Eye and we get some explanation in the next one as to what it does or what they need to do to protect it or what the outcome may be. I don't know how long Moraine intends that they stay there. I don't really know what Moraine herself can do that this Green Man can't. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, clearly, she didn't feel it necessary, at least as far as we're aware, to write to Tar Valon to say, hey, so here's what I've discovered and verified through several different streams of information, sources. Prepare people for the worst kind of a message. So I think there was that implication that the three boys would do something and likely use their power to do it. We'll find out. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you next time. Okay, thanks, bye.